following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Hey folks, Brian Keene here. You know, summer's over. We're entering the fall and then the winter. Halloween's coming up, Thanksgiving, and then of course the holiday shopping season. Speaking of the holiday shopping season, let me tell you about subculturecorsets.com. They've got everything you need for everyone on your list for this holiday season. Clothing, accessories, gifts, books, you name it, they've got it. They sponsor every show on the Project Entertainment Network, including this one. So please give them your business. Visit subculturecorsets.com.
Project Entertainment Network presents My Favorite Story, an anthology featuring short fiction written by the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network podcasts, with
Mary Sangiovanni and Brian Keene from The Horror Show,
Chuck Buda, Aaron Sweet, El Mahore and Armand Rosamilia of the Mando Method,
Jeannie Engel of Origins,
Bizung's Mr. Frank,
Tom Clark from Necrocast, It On,
It Cooks, Amber Fallon,
Three Guys with Beards, Christopher Golden, Jim Moore and Jonathan Mabry,
The Buttercup of Doom, Kelly Owen,
Matters of Faith's Jay Wilburn,
John Urbancic of Eight Stains.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology from Project Entertainment Network, available on Kindle, Nook, and soon in paperback from the Project Entertainment Network store.
There shall come a podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
Greetings, true believer, and welcome to another pulse-pounding episode of Defenders Dialogue. Who is this speaking, you may ask? Where is crepuscular Christopher Golden and Brobdingnagian Brian Keene? Well, I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news to tell you. You see, the Fool Killer listened to the last few episodes and has decided he's had quite enough of the two of them, so they are gone for now. And it's a good thing, too, because there are a few things you and I have to talk about. See, I was listening to last episode when Christopher and Brian, the dearly departed, were having a conversation about how Omega the Unknown intersected with the Defenders, and they referenced an issue of the Defenders, which I happen to have written. But did they say that? No, they did not. So I am here to clear up a few things and explain how that came to be and how it came to pass, that I, rather than Steve Gerber, the genius, brilliant Steve Gerber, came to write a particular issue of the Omega and fill in a few facts about what was going on in the Marvel bullpen at the time. Yes, that's right. Who am I? I am sparkling Scott Edelman, and unlike the crepuscular one and the Brobdingnagian one, my nickname was actually given to me by Stan the Man Lee when I worked in the Marvel bullpen from 1974 through 1977 and continued freelancing there through 1981. And I happened to write quite a few comics there at the time. I was just a minor light there, no big deal. One of the grade C people, if I do say so myself, though I'll leave it to Brian to say nicer things about me. That's what he's here for, if he comes back from the Fool Killer's revenge. But in any case, so much of what I wrote at Marvel, I only got a chance to write at Marvel because of the chaos of the day and the missed deadlines and the fact that if you failed to get a book to the printer in time, you were charged, I think it was $500 a day, something like that. So Jumbo John Verporten and the various others of the day did their best to make sure those deadlines were never missed. And one of the things they instituted was something called a fill-in issue. And what that meant is a fill-in issue might be written and would just sit around waiting for the writer or the artist or the letterer or something to cause a delay in an issue that would make that printing deadline be missed, and they would yank it out and throw it in. And that's how people like Bill Mantlo got to write so many books. I think he probably did a fill-in issue for almost every Marvel comic at the time. You know Bill best for having co-created Rocket Raccoon, who you see in Guardians of the Galaxy, but he probably wrote one issue at least of every single Marvel title in the mid-70s. Other people got to benefit from that as well. I got to write an issue of Master of Kung Fu that was drawn by Mike Zeck, but what brings you and me together today is Omega the Unknown. Now, what happened one day, I wish I could pin down exactly what caused the printing deadline to be missed. What occurred is, rather than having some fill-in issues done that were just sitting around waiting to be tossed in with a missed deadline, this instead was something to prevent a missed deadline. And one day, Jim Shooter took me and took Roger Stern out to dinner at a restaurant nearby the Marvel offices at 575 Madison Avenue and said, okay, you two guys, you're both going to write the next 2 issues of Omega the Unknown, and that will allow the regular team to catch up. Who wants to have which artist? We were given a choice of Jim Mooney and Lee Elias, both of whom were magnificent artists. I loved them both as a kid. I mean, because of my age, I grew up reading Supergirl, which was drawn by Jim Mooney back in the old days at DC, so I felt a very nostalgic feeling about him. I also loved reading Lee Elias comics back when I was a kid as well, but for some reason Jim Mooney was the one who appealed to me, and so my issue ended up coming first. That was Omega the Unknown number 7, which was the March 1977 issue, and Roger Stern's was the issue after mine. And in 1976 I wrote up a plot which featured the character of Blockbuster, who ended up going into crime or dealing with crime at that point simply to take care of his kid. He didn't care what happened to him. He just wanted to watch out for that son of his. And the ending that you were told about in the previous episode of, not Omega the Unknown, but the previous episode of Defenders Dialogue, they referenced an ending which was rather unusual, in which Omega let a villain get away. That was the ending of the issue that I wrote, in which, as Blockbuster was explaining to Omega the Unknown, you gotta understand why I'm doing this thing. It's really all for my kid. All I care about is my kid. Nothing else in the world matters to me but protecting him. They actually, what does Blockbuster say? This isn't your money. Why couldn't you let things be? Don't you understand? I didn't want to do all this. I had to do it. I got a son, and I got to protect him. And my thought was, well, that would resonate with Omega taking care of the kid under his care, James Michael. And therefore, he just sort of watched as the villain ran away. And that much you were told about in the last episode, how strange it was that a hero would just sort of say, okay, well, he's watching out for a kid. He reminds me of me watching out for my ward, or whatever you want to call James Michael, and lets him go. But the thing of it is, the story does not end there. What ended up happening was that the Comics Code got involved. People today reading comics without a Comics Code in existence anymore might not remember that at one time every single comic book, except Archie, I think, and Harvey, I think, they got a special dispensation because they were meant for kids. Maybe not Harvey, but Archie definitely. And every single original page of artwork was Xeroxed, sent to the Comics Code. The Comics Code would read it all, put a rubber stamp on the back of the piece of artwork saying it had been reviewed, and would tell you what you needed to do to bring it up to snuff so that Comics Code seal could be on there. And in my case, the Comics Code took offense and said, well, you cannot let the bad guy go unpunished. And what they did is they sent me the following memo that says, page 31, panels 3 and 4, Omega lets Blockbuster go after he has just robbed a bank. This is a direct violation of the Code Provision General Standards Part A, Number 6, which states, quote, in every instance, good shall triumph over evil, and the criminal punished for his misdeeds. Although the crime may have been committed for a good purpose, it does not justify it. Try as we might to explain to them, well, the villain will eventually be punished in the following issue. That was not good enough for the Comics Code, and therefore what had to be done, it's a terrible, terrible thing. And if you go to my website, scottedelman.com, and search on the words Omega the Unknown, you will find what was done to the artwork. We literally had to white out the illustration of the policeman as he was being punched by the villain running away from Omega the Unknown, and therefore you have Blockbuster running in a very weird position with an arm up in the air, which originally was punching a policeman, and instead it just looks like he's running in a weird way. But there's whiteout all over that page because we had to remove that character from the page and therefore protect the morals of the youth of America. One thing that does make me curious about the whole censorship of that issue, however, is removing the policeman from the artwork does not save the villain from getting away, meaning the thing they complained about, that a villain got away unpunished, the villain still gets away unpunished. All we did was remove a police officer from being harmed as part of the escape. So I wish I could remember the negotiations that went on between me or the editor-in-chief, whoever the representative at Marvel was, and the Comics Code Authority, that was sufficient to have it be published, but for some reason it was. It doesn't make any sense to me because that still violates the Comics Code provision, General Standards Part A, Number 6, but oh well. As I said, you can go and see the before and after if you wish by going to my own website, and I held that page up to an extremely bright light so you can sort of make out the hidden policeman there and see what had been done. I wish there was a way for me to remove that whiteout, but I don't think there really is to show it to you in all its glory. But poor Jim Mooney was edited and censored. And I should point out the thing about the Comics Code. This might be apocryphal, but when the Comics Code went under, I believe all its files were just tossed out in the trash and were not rescued, and what few letters from them telling you to make this change or make that change, the only ones that exist are the ones that have been saved by the company, if they save them, or by the writers and artists who were amused by what the comics companies were being asked to do. So therefore it's all gone. So, but if you go to my website, you can find some of those. And I should point out the fact, as was mentioned last issue, there's a trade paperback called Omega the Unknown Classic, and the only reason that paperback exists, you may not be aware of this, is the novelist Jonathan Lethem, who began in science fiction and has now become so much more, the way Kurt Vonnegut has had more of a cultural impact outside of those science fiction stories he wrote when he started out. He wrote a novel called The Fortress of Solitude that was set in Brooklyn, and Omega the Unknown was referenced many, many times in that novel, and I believe that is what caused the character to come up to prominence again, that caused Marvel to get the idea to collect the original issues, and therefore it was collected in 2005 so that you were then able to read them without having to track down all of the comic books and pay that kind of money for them. So you can track that down. But that is some of the secret story of what happened with Omega the Unknown. I was very glad that years later I was able to catch up with Jim Mooney at San Diego Comic-Con and Artist Alley and explain to him all how much it meant to have him touch my words that way. It's a very odd thing that hopefully you can understand, is that every artist who I worked with who drew the comics that I experienced as a kid had a very powerful effect on me, far beyond any talent comparison you might have between the new art and the old art. You may have the most brilliant artist in the world, could be the best comic book artist ever, but if he was of my generation, it somehow did not mean as much to me as working with the idols of my youth, the people I lionized, the George Tuska and Ramona Fradon and Jim Mooney, who had drawn so many of those Supergirl stories. So I was very pleased with that. To go around in a rather circular way, there were some things that I did in that issue of Omega the Unknown that I was proud of, and others I was not so proud of, and I am not so sure that today, if I had been offered a similar job and hadn't been only 21 years old, I might have had a different kind of integrity and be able to not do that fill-in issue, because this particular character was a creation of Steve Gerber and Mary Screenis. It was their, I don't know what I want to call it, their passion project, shall we say. I believe that of all the other comic books that were done, well, I'm forgetting Howard the Duck for a second, so we'll set Howard the Duck to one side. But Omega the Unknown was very personal to them. And I believe that these days I have more of an understanding of creators' rights, and I might have said, you know what, I would rather not take that character in a direction that the creators did not want it to go. It's a lot different when you're doing the latest issue of Spider-Man or Superman, and by now there have been so many iterations it doesn't matter if you change things. But to step in with what they were doing then and send it in a different direction, I think now I would have not done that. As an example, in that particular issue of Omega the Unknown, if you read it, one of the interesting aspects about that character is he never speaks. So for the first 6 issues of the magazine, he's wandering around, never saying a word, until my issue. Did it occur to me as a 21-year-old hopeful comic book writer with a hopefully long career of comics ahead of him that maybe Steve and Mary had some special thing they were planning to do, that there was a reason that the character wasn't speaking, and they would reveal it at the appropriate time with all the power and glory it was meant to have? That did not occur to me at that young age, when I was thinking that perhaps I had a career in comics ahead of me. And so I had Omega the Unknown at a particular juncture in the story. It was a character named Gramps, who was a regular supporting cast member, and someone that he loved had died, and he was sitting around being extremely sad, and Omega the Unknown is listening to that and calming Gramps down by patting him and everything, and giving him the expressions that someone who doesn't speak can only give. And Omega the Unknown finally says, "I am sorry," and then runs off and gets in a big fight with Blockbuster. Who knows what the true first words of Omega the Unknown actually were supposed to be? Probably not "I am sorry." And that makes me think that I should say "I am sorry" to Steve Gerber and Mary Screenis. Steve is no longer with us, so I can't say it to him, but I can certainly say it now to Mary Screenis. So I am sorry for having stepped in and messed with this creation, which was so important to you. We have gone far afield from the stomping ground of what Defender's Dialogue is meant to cover, but this is a little background on Omega the Unknown for those of you who have been listening to previous episodes. I have no idea whether Crepuscular Christopher Golden and Brobdingnagian and Brian Keene will be able to be resuscitated from the ashes that the Fool Killer has turned them into. We can always hope. We can always hope. But before I let you go back to your lives, there are a few more things I think you ought to know. One is, even if Brobdingnagian and Brian Keene does not resurface, you still have another way of listening to him, for he was once a guest on my podcast, Eating the Fantastic, in which I sit down, have a meal with someone, and you get to eavesdrop as we chow down and have a conversation. It's a far more relaxing way, to my mind, than people sitting in front of the big microphones at which they can sometimes get nervous. Instead, you're just sitting across the table gabbing with friends. And I go out to restaurants, and sometimes I invade telethons, as I did last year with the Scares That Cares telethon, and interviewed young Brian Keene. And he appeared on episode 34 of Eating the Fantastic, so you can hear more of that man if you go to eatingthefantastic.com and search for him, or just go to Eating the Fantastic on iTunes. And the other thing you should know as well is that if you want to know more of the secret history of the comics, you can go to scottedelman.com and go to my blog there, because for many years I have been putting up old memos and artwork that never got published and all sorts of unseen secrets of the comics because of something that happened many years ago to a friend of mine, a former boss, the late Len Wein, who co-created Swamp Thing, Wolverine, many other characters, and gave me so many chances in the business. Well, at one point he had a house fire that destroyed a lot of the artwork, a lot of the memos he had. He had a lot of correspondence back and forth with Alan Moore over the Watchmen, and I started to think, gee, I've got a lot of things I own from my days in comics. I have every memo I ever sent to and from Marvel, things to and from Stan the Man Lee. God forbid I should have a house fire. It's more important that the information exists for historians than the objects exist. So little by little I've been scanning and putting those things up. So if you go to scottedelman.com, go to the blog, click on Marvel Comics, you'll be able to find some of those things. Even on comics, there are things for DC Comics I had, memos and letters and so forth. So if you're interested in some of those secrets, go there. And we sometimes also have comics guests on Eating the Fantastic. So Marv Wolfman was a guest there. You can find that as well. And now I think I have gabbed enough. You have listened to me. I'm afraid if I talk any longer, the Fool Killer will come for me, and we would not want that to happen, would we? So there's only one more thing I must say to you before letting you go, and you know what that is, and it is Excelsior, true believers.
Three guys with beards.
The Project Entertainment Network store, featuring t-shirts, mugs, stickers, hoodies and more from your favorite Project Entertainment Network podcasts.
Ink Stains, Scribbler's Rest.
The Horror Show with Brian Keene.
Why not show your loyalty by wearing a cool product from the podcast group and show off to your friends?
It Cooks.
Armcast.
The Mondo Method.
Monster Attack.
Necrocastical.
Go to projectentertainmentnetwork.com and click on the store tab for more details.
The Liars Club podcast.
Pizza.
The Lunch Ladies Book Club.
Matters of Faith.
The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with stuff from the best podcasts on the internet.
The Curtain Jerkers.
Buttercup of Doom.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
Do you love comic books and consider yourself a die-hard fan? Then you need to listen to Parlapod. We have news, reviews, and interviews with your favorite pros, all while bringing some serious laughs. New episodes drop every Wednesday in time for New Comic Book Day. Parlapod is available on the Project Entertainment Network, all major podcast outlets, and parlapod.com. Tune in and fuel your fandom with Parlapod.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.